actually buying the Nintendo Switch 2? This is the question that has been on my mind since the console first launched 6 months ago, and we finally have the answer. With the recent release of November sales data, we can finally see the truth, and honestly, this is not what Nintendo was hoping for. You see, Nintendo has been riding high on the launch success of the Switch 2, but that can only get you so far, and November sales data just proved that. And if I'm being honest, this isn't even what I was expecting going into this holiday season. So today we're going to dive in and figure out what exactly is going on with the Switch 2 sales this time, because if things keep looking this bad for Nintendo, they're going to be forced to change their strategy going into 2026. But before we jump in, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Guys, can I just take a moment to thank you, because we recently hit 25,000 subscribers on the channel, which is actually insane, and it's all thanks to you guys who've been liking the videos and using the hype feature. And I'm gonna need your help on this video, because every time I talk about Switch 2 sales, the Nintendo fanboys always dislike bomb the video. So please help me fight them off by dropping a like down below if you actually do like the video. Okay, let's jump right in here. Video game physical software and hardware sales just had the worst November in the United States since 1995. Red flags. You said it, Rebecca. Now look, I don't want to insult your intelligence. I'm going to be relying on this article pretty heavily in the video, but I do think I have some interesting analysis and insight, plus some more stuff we'll talk about later in the video. But if you just want to read this article yourself, I know y'all can read. You could, it's going to be linked down below. I want to respect your time. If that's all you care about, check that out. But if you want to stick around for me, I would greatly appreciate it. All right, let's jump in here. They say, according to Circana's monthly report, which paints a pretty dismal picture of last month's commercial performance, the industry in the United States, that's the games industry, saw declines across the board in hardware, accessories, and console spending, for an overall drop of 4% year over year at 5.9 billion in total spending. Now this is interesting out of the gate, because one of the things that we've seen specifically from Circana over the last couple of months since the Switch 2 launched was that hardware is down X%, but the launch of the Switch 2 pulled it back up to whatever. That's constantly been a point that the data analysis teams have been pointing at, saying like, look, the Switch 2 is saving the hardware sales market for this year. Like, that's been the biggest thing that people have been talking about. So now that we're 6 months out, we're still seeing a drop 4% year over year. Kind of alarming, to be honest with you. Let's jump into hardware here. They say, more specifically, hardware spending was down a whopping 27% year over year to $695 million, the lowest hardware spending total for November since 2005's 455 million. Even worse, unit sales reached 1.6 million, which is the lowest November total since 1995's 1.4 million. But I'm sure some of you are already wondering, like, why did I specifically point out the Switch 2 and Nintendo in the title and thumbnail, when clearly this is an industry-wide thing? This is happening across the board. The entire industry is having a horrible November, right? We'll talk about that later in this video, because obviously with the Switch 2 being the latest hardware on the market, and with all of the headlines throughout the entire year, myself included, saying that it has been the fastest selling console of all time, obviously that's true. You would expect that going into November, like, we would see some sort of bump, some sort of pop, some sort of hype, and the Switch 2 could not save this from being the worst November in 20 years. That's insane. That's actually insane. The fastest selling console of all time could not save this. What does that mean? Well, great news. We're going to answer that question in this video. They go on to say, and that's representative of declines across the board. Xbox Series hardware sales were down at 70% year over year. That's a crazy drop, considering that last year's sales weren't even good either, right? So you are down 70% over a bad year. That's crazy. PS5 sales were down over 40%. That's also a massive drop off. And combined unit sales of Switch and Switch 2 were down over 10% from Switch sales last year, despite this being a launch year for the Nintendo Switch 2. Okay, I'm gonna read that again so you guys can really soak in what they just said. Combined unit sales of Switch and Switch 2. Okay, so all the sales of the Switch 2 plus all the sales of the Switch 1 for November of this year were down over 10% from just Switch sales last year. What? Hello? Excuse me? So Switch 1 sales in November of 2024 4. By the way, the Switch was out for 7 years and 8 months by that point. Okay, so the Switch 1, after almost 8 years, had a better November than the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 this year. Listen close, come here. If you were wondering why they lowered the price of the Mario Kart World Bundle, you have your answer. Not only do you have your answer, it just slapped you in the face. Gone is the argument of a loss leader. Gone is the argument, oh, it's just Cyber Monday. No, the retailers hit the panic button. The retailers literally saw, I know the meme is that I always say this in the title and thumbnail, okay? This has been the meme on the channel, but the retailers actually saw a sales collapse. They watched it in real time over Black Friday weekend. They literally were like, oh shit, this thing's selling like ass. We thought this was gonna pop off. We need to do something, like drop the price by 50 bucks. Nintendo, they can figure that out. That is literally what happened. The data literally proves it. And I just gotta take a quick moment to say I told you so, because I was right in my analysis with the price drop of the Switch 2. I had lots of people in the comment section of that video saying, oh, you don't know anything about retail. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, really? Well, dang, someone who doesn't know what he's talking about was right again, man. And I'm so glad I'm so humble, because otherwise I'd be a menace, bro. I would be a menace. I'm just so humble. I'm just so kind. I'm so forgiving to those that are negative towards me. The community is so lucky to have such an upstanding fellow as myself, who's just so humble, so down to earth, zero inflated ego. Oh, you're welcome. Okay, I'm just kidding, of course, but I was right, so at least give me that. And look, I have been critical of the Switch 2 for months now. That's no secret, right? But even me, I've been playing it pretty safe. I've been being very generous to the Switch and Nintendo fans. I've been saying, like, look, there's been a lot of shortcomings here. A lot of people are mad about the Switch 2, but it's still the fastest selling console, and it's still probably going to do well in holiday. And it looks like I was just wrong to be that generous to the Switch 2. I really did think that it would have a fantastic holiday, and I feel like arriving at that conclusion was not only generous, but it was pretty logical, right? I mean, fastest selling console of all time, there's a bunch of games lined up for the holiday, and all the competition is 5 years old now, so hey, why wouldn't it have a good holiday, right? The Switch 1 is one of the most successful consoles of all time. Nintendo is riding on the high of that console. All signs pointed to the first holiday season being good, right? At least the first one. You know, next year, who knows, right? I had no idea. Maybe next year things would actually fall apart, but I thought surely for the first holiday season, the Switch 2 will do really well, right? I feel like that was the most logical conclusion to come to, even with all of the negativity and backlash and all the things going on. I thought the normies won't care. The normies aren't paying attention. The normies are just gonna buy the Nintendo thing for their kid, because that's what they always do, right? Especially coming off the hype of the Switch 1, especially with the Switch 2 being the fastest selling console of all time. I did not expect the Switch 1 and Switch 2 to sell worse than the Switch 1 last year in November. So few people thought that. Literally so few people actually thought that. And I've said it once and I'll say it again. I actually legitimately think that Nintendine is the only person on YouTube that has actually called this pretty well. I mean, like, look, he's been tanking the hate for months now, and I think when someone's right, you just gotta call it out. Like, what are we doing? But here's where things get even more interesting. The article asks, what is going on? And I've been asking that too, okay? As pointed out by Circana Senior Director Matt Piscatella, video game hardware has never been more expensive, reaching an all-time November high of $439 per unit, up 11% year over year. Matt just unironically agreed with the drop the price people. Like, I don't know if he knows it, or obviously that's not his intention or whatever, but like the drop the price crowd has been getting memed on since the Switch 2 was revealed. Everyone, including myself in some videos, have been like, look, the prices, I mean, it's at least on par with industry standard, right? Like, yes, I would love it to be cheaper. Obviously, I'm a consumer. I would love things to get cheaper. I mean, who doesn't want that? But it's not like the Switch 2 was like $800, right? So it's like, you know, it is what it is. People have been dunking on the drop the price crowd, and yet here we see the data comes out and like actually drop the price. They always say that everything is random until it's not, right? Once you have enough data, you can just look at the trend, and just look at the chart that Matt himself shared over on Blue Sky. Now, some people have asked, why do I use Blue Sky? The answer, I don't, okay? I think Matt only uses Blue Sky, which is why I keep referencing it. I don't know anybody who actually uses Blue Sky besides him. But anyway, here is the actual chart that he shared here, okay? US video game hardware total units sold and average price price paid November 1995 through November of 2005. Okay, so the orange line is the average price of a video game console per November. Okay, you can see at the very bottom here, and the blue bars represent volume of units sold in that November. So as the orange line goes up, the sales go down. I mean, is that really, like, what are we talking about now? Look, okay, I understand that the economy straight up ain't great right now. Okay, it ain't great, and so there's definitely something to be said about correlation versus causation, right? But at a certain point, how many Novembers in a row do you need before you look at the data and say, like, okay, yeah, clearly price is part of the reason why sales aren't great, right? I mean, really, is that dramatic? Is that like unreasonable to say? Like, we can look at November of 2022, right? The average price here was about $400 and hardware unit sales were about 3 million. Here we can see that the average price is like 440 and hardware sales were about half that, right? So does raising the price $40 on average cause the collapse in sales 50%? Probably there's something else going on there, right? Like, there's macroeconomic factors that are contributing here clearly. I also think the recent increase in the price of the Xbox probably artificially raises the price of this, but also the lower price of the NEX Playground probably compensates for that. So it's kind of like, I mean, really, it seems like it's pretty clear, right? Like, even with the hype of a brand new Nintendo console, the price is just too high. It looks like the price is just too high. Now, if the economy was doing fantastic right now, would it be this dramatic? Probably not, right? But at a certain point, it's just like the answer is pretty clear. Now, I know you could look and be like, oh, well, you know, the average price of a console in 1995 was only like $140, and that's still the same units as now, right? So, I mean, clearly price doesn't matter. And it's like, okay, well, 140 bucks in 1995 was a lot more money than you think. And also, the video game industry is way bigger now than it was in 1995. What are we even talking about? What? Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking about 1996. Okay, so this must be like the year that the N64 came out, right? Are we really going to compare the gaming industry around the N64 to the industry now? I think everyone knows the gaming industry is way bigger now than it's ever been. Okay, so TLDR, price matters a lot, and that's clearly a big contributing factor to why unit sales were so low this year. It's not the full picture, but obviously we can all be honest with ourselves, it's a big component, right? I mean, everyone watching, like, we all see the price of groceries, we all see the price of insurance, we all see the price of rent, we all see the price of childcare. Like, let's be real, right? Everyone's very price sensitive right now, okay? Especially when it comes to optional entertainment categories like video games. You could play Genshin on your phone for free. Like, why would you spend $450? You know what I mean? Like, all right, let's move on with the article. They go on to talk more about what Matt Piscatella says with regards to the Switch 2. He says he's watching its sales very closely and offers this analysis of its current situation. So this is directly from Matt himself. With 6 months in the market, it remains the fastest selling video game hardware in US history. However, that's a big however. Part of what was driving that was its availability to be bought during its launch window. It's been extremely rare to have such a successful new device not suffer supply constraints going into its first holiday sales period. Unit sales of Switch 2 were lower than those of Switch 1 during each console's first November, but the price points are also quite different. Okay, let's unpack everything that he just said there. Okay, so one, he has come out and admitted, right? And like, look, I don't think Matt has skin in the game here at all. He's not a Nintendo fanboy. He's not an anti-Nintendo grifter, as people like to say. He's just analyzing the data, right? And when it fits one person's narrative, they run with it. When it fits another person's narrative, they run with it. And he probably finds it humorous to see how that happens and plays out across the internet, right? So shout out to Matt. I don't think he cares about any of this. He's just looking at the numbers and reporting the numbers, and that's pretty much it. That's literally his job, right? So what he just said right here is that the reason it sold so well during its launch window was not because it was the best system of all time, was not because of the exclusives, it wasn't because of this, that, or the other thing. It's because it was available, right? And this is something that we have literally never seen before. We've never seen a console as available as the Switch 2 at launch. And I'm 31. I've been around the block. Okay, I remember, God God bless my dad, yo, Omniarch. All right, I don't know what nickname to give him here for the channel, okay, but he got me a Wii on launch Christmas, bro. Actually insane, yo. Omniarch the goat, okay, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to get a Wii that year. It wasn't easy to get a PS3 that year, okay, and since then it hasn't been easy to get any console, and especially around 2020, okay, with the launch of the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. So we're going to come back to this point here talking about its sales during its launch window, because that's the question that I asked at the beginning of the video. Who is buying the Switch 2? That's the question we want to answer today. I will talk about that later in the video, but let's keep on reading here. Okay, the average price paid for a Nintendo Switch in November of 2017 was $309, which, if adjusted for inflation, is approximately $405 in November of 2025 dollars. It's crazy how much inflation has gone up in the last 8 years. Like, it's actually sad. It's really sad. Please take me back. We had 24-hour Walmarts. We had, like, where I live in New York, we had like $2 McChickens, okay, $1.50 McChickens. I don't remember what they were back in college, but they were cheaper then than they were now. All right, we had it all. Take me back. All right, anyway, that's compared to the $486 average price for Switch 2 in November of 2025. Perhaps it is a case of demand having been pulled forward earlier in the year because people could find them. I think that is definitely a massive component of what actually happened here. Or perhaps the mass market is not as quickly adopting Switch 2 as it did Switch 1. That's definitely also true. This is not an either or situation. I think Matt knows that. Maybe he just chose his words poorly. I think it's definitely both, right? It's definitely both of those things are partly true. Or perhaps consumers are looking elsewhere for holiday gifting as the prices continue to rise in video game hardware. Tough to say at the moment. Matt, love you, buddy. It ain't tough to say. It's actually all of them. You actually, all of those things are some percentage of the reason that the Switch 2 did not sell very well in November compared to previous years of Nintendo consoles, of any console. And really, this second bullet point here that he mentions is a really big component that I think not enough people are talking about, right? I think a lot of people looked at the launch lineup for the Switch 2 and said, there's not really a huge game, right? There's not a huge, like Mario Kart World, sure, right? That's a big game. Everyone knows it's a big game. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was fantastic, loved it, right? I thought Mario Kart World was good too. Donkey Kong Bonanza is like, oh, it's almost a 3D Mario, right? It's almost there, but it ain't. You know what I mean? It's not. It's just almost isn't. You know what I mean? So it is not a 3D Mario. Okay, so we've got Hyrule Warriors. That's a Zelda game, but it's not really a Zelda game. It's kind of a Warriors game, actually. It's a Warriors game. Okay, so then we got Pokemon Legends ZA. That's a Pokemon game, but actually it's not really a Pokemon. It's actually not really a mainline game. It's a spin-off game that looks horrible, by the way, and it's already on Switch 1. And then we've got Metroid Prime 4, which the kids don't even know what that is because the last one was 18 years ago. And so like they actually legitimately don't know what Metroid Prime is because they actually were not born the last time we saw a Metroid Prime game. Okay, so when you actually take a step back and you look at the launch lineup, it's like, okay, for a Nintendo fanboy, that's a great launch lineup. For the average normie, they still are waiting for Animal Crossing. They're still waiting for Pokemon Generation 10. They're still waiting for Mario Odyssey 2. They're still waiting for the next Zelda. They're still waiting for the next Smash Bros. They're still waiting for the everyday normie games that all of the normie people buy. So the launch lineup actually, when you are, for being honest with ourselves, was good for the fanboys, was not that good for the mass market. Really, all they had was Mario Kart World and maybe Donkey Kong Bonanza. Pokemon's on Switch 1, Metroid's on Switch 1, Warriors it's a Warriors game. So, and Kirby Air Riders, that's another one that like the kids were not born for Kirby Air Ride, right? You know what I mean? Like, so it is what it is. That's not even really a Kirby game. It's an Air Rider game. So, hey, it would have been delusional to assume that the mass market was going to be like, oh, Kirby Air Riders, yeah, like, why would they do that? There's no data to suggest that. Like, that's never happened. It didn't happen. So, I mean, like, I think that's a huge bullet point here. Okay. And also, yes, the prices are too high. All right, let's look a little bit at the software here. Things aren't looking much better on the content side. While Circana reports that content spending was up 1% year over year to 4.8 billion, that's with subscription spending rising 16% and 2% growth in mobile. Physical software sales meanwhile dropped 14% year over year to the worst November since 1995, the year Circana began tracking them. That's crazy. That's actually insane. Talking about 30 years. What? Since I was born in 94. Okay, we haven't seen a video game crash this bad since I was born, my entire life. What? In fact, let's just take a look at the 2025 year-to-date best-selling software as reported by Circana. Okay, this is January 5th through November 29th. A couple of things to note here. Okay, first of all, sales of software packaged in a hardware bundle are not included in the best-selling titles charts. Okay, so that means Mario Kart World and all the Switch 2 sold with Pokemon Legends EA, that is not included here. Also, if we take a look at some of the asterisks down here, digital sales on Nintendo platforms are not included. They keep that data close to their chest, and digital sales on Nintendo and Xbox platforms are not included as well. Okay, so keep all that in mind. With that being said though, let's take a look at the sales that we do have. Battlefield 6, best-selling game of the year. NBA 2K26 comes in at number 2. Monster Hunter Wilds, Borderlands 4, EA Sports College Football, Madden 26, Black Ops 7 just barely beating out Black Ops 6, but of course that's a little bit weird because they're both on Game Pass. Also, Black Ops 7 is $35 right now. Yikes. If you bought that full price, I would feel insulted, and I would return it if I were you, if you can. Oblivion Remastered, fantastic game, by the way. I only put probably 12 hours into the remaster before I was just like, okay, yeah, it's Oblivion. I love Oblivion. I beat the game back in the day. Maybe I'll come back to it at some point, but my backlog is just so big now. But loved Oblivion Remastered. Ghost of Yotei, I'd probably mispronounce that. EA Sports FC 26, MLB, Elden Ring DLC is crazy. Kingdom Come Deliverance, Minecraft still on here. Helldivers 2, Split Fiction. Okay, so a couple of things to note. Again, we don't see any Nintendo games here. None of the Nintendo games are on here. Okay, now we can say yes, digital sales will definitely play a factor, and because of that, Nintendo games would definitely be up here, right? I mean, let's be real. Mario Kart World would be up here. Pokemon Legends EA would be up here, and maybe even Donkey Kong Bonanza. That game did end up selling pretty well. But when we look at the industry as a whole, if we figure out which gaming system is the one that people typically mostly buy physical for, right? The answer is Nintendo. Most people, like if you look at the PlayStation 5, the Xbox and PC, obviously, those are much more digital focused than Nintendo. And so when we factor that in, it's like, okay, well, if Nintendo has more physical sales than the others, you would expect at least one game on here from them, maybe, right? I guess not. And we've gone over this on the channel before, but Pokemon Legends EA might be around the top 10 here, as reported by Matt. I'm too lazy to find his tweet over on Blue Sky. You can find it in my recent videos if you want to, but he said that if you factored in digital, it might come in between 10 and 14, somewhere in here, Pokemon Legends EA. So yeah, not even in the top 5, not even in the top 10. So, you know, the Pokemon fanboys can cope and see all they want, but the data just is the data. It's not a very good Pokemon game. All right, let's go back to the article here and answer the question that I asked at the beginning of the video, and that was, who is buying the Nintendo Switch 2? This is the question that I've wondered since it first launched. Now, with it being the fastest selling console at launch, my knee-jerk reaction was that this thing was tapping into some of the normies, some of the mass market, some of the hype must be causing some of the normies to buy the console, right? And I think that was a good analysis, but now that we see this being the worst November since 1995 or 2005 even, I think it's pretty clear who bought the system at launch. The answer is the fanboys. It was actually the die-hard Nintendo fans that came out in droves, who loved the Switch 1, were part of the hype for the Switch 2. Those were the people that ended up buying it. Now, scalpers were part of that, but I actually don't love the scalper argument, and the reason for that is because it was very clear within the first week that the Switch 2 was easy to get. I know people that scalp things, and they would be the first to jump on this if it were hard to get. It was not hard to get. Okay, so those that tried to scalp it made maybe 50 bucks, not even, and by the second or third week the scalping was gone. People were not scalping this thing because, I mean, think about it, scalpers are incentivized to scalp because of profits, and there is no profit to be made on a Switch 2 when you can go into any Target, Best Buy, or whatever and just buy one off the shelf at retail, right? There's no profit there, there's no scalpers. Okay, and a lot of scalpers probably just returned their units, you know what I mean? Like they just were like, I don't need this anymore. So I don't love the scalper argument. I don't think scalpers were like a big thing here. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. I don't know if, like, I guess they don't factor in returns, right? Like maybe a lot of the first 3 days it was scalpers buying it, and then like a couple days later they all returned it, right? And that's just not reported. I don't know, that's all speculation. I don't want to speculate on that because I don't know. There's no point. We'll never know the answer. But here's why it's very clear to me now that the launch success of the Switch 2 was purely fueled by a vast majority, probably 90%, was just diehard Nintendo fans. Here's why that's the case. Okay, if we look at this data and you can say, okay, well, Omni, like, look, you know, all of the game consoles have had a bad November, so why are we talking about just the Switch 2 when clearly the reason that this is happening is because the economy is bad, right? I think that's probably going to be the number one thing that the Nintendo fanboys jump on. They say, oh, well, you know, the economy's bad, that's why it's sold so poorly here, right? And it's like, okay, that's partly true, right? But was the economy really good back in June? Let's just be honest with ourselves. No, it wasn't. The economy has not been great all year. Okay, so when we think about that, and also reminder, back in June there was still uncertainty with global trade and tariffs and all that other stuff. There was a lot going on back then, so let's not sit here and pretend like, oh, the economy just got bad just now all of a sudden, right? Like, no, let's be real. All the adults in the room know that the economy's been bad since probably 2024. Okay, like the amount of people losing their jobs over the last year has been insane. The prices of things have not come down since they started going up in 2023 and in 2022. Prices are high. The economy's been bad all year. Okay, so when we look at this November and we compare it to launch of the Switch 2, it's like, okay, the economy was bad in both situations, right? Is it 3% worse now? Sure, but is that going to really move the needle? No. So if we have a bad economy now and we have a bad economy 6 months ago, well, then we have to ask ourselves, like, okay, well, how could it be the case that it would sell so well in the bad June economy, but it would sell so poorly in the bad November economy, right? Well, if the economy is the same in both situations, it's like, okay, well, clearly it's not the economy, right? That's clearly not why. So then we ask ourselves, okay, well, who would be willing to buy a brand new Nintendo console in a bad economy when we look at the general data in November and see that the normies aren't? The answer is the diehard Nintendo fans. That's the question that I was wondering back in June. How successful is this thing in the mass market? And now that we have the November data, we can cross that off. We know the answer. November is when the normies were supposed to be buying the console, and the demand right now is very low. Okay, so if the demand from the normies is low for the Switch 2 now, then the demand from the normies for the Switch 2 in the equally bad economy in June was also low. So now we finally know the answer. Yes, the launch success of the Switch 2 was fueled 80 or 90% by the Nintendo fans, and I think that that conclusion was accurately predicted by many people here on YouTube, but I was not comfortable arriving at that conclusion until we actually knew for sure, right? Because again, when you see things like the fastest selling console of all time, it's like, okay, well, maybe there is some broad appeal here, maybe there is some genuine hype here, because that's not an easy accomplishment realistically, right? I mean, again, bad economy back in June, people are spending $450, $550 for the console with tax. Okay, that's a lot of money. Maybe this thing actually has some mass appeal, right? But the holiday season was the real test. This was when the truth was always going to come out. And if the Switch 2 had a blowout November, a blowout Black Friday, maybe we could sit back and say, okay, yes, this thing is being adopted by the masses. It's always been a mass appealing thing. Maybe that's why it sold so well back in June, but that's not what happened. That's not the case. We know that now, and there's lots of factors for this, right? And again, I want to be clear, it's not just affecting Nintendo. Clearly hardware sales are down, right? But PlayStation didn't launch a console this year. Xbox didn't launch a console this year. You know what I mean? Like, I think the most interesting thing to discuss here is the Switch 2, because that's the most relevant thing. It's the newest thing. It's the thing that most people are talking about, and it's the one that people were going to be focusing on the most. If anything should have sold well this November, it should have been the Switch 2, and selling worse than the Switch 1 last year on its 7th or 8th November, that's actually kind of embarrassing. Truthfully, like, that's quite embarrassing. Okay, so now that we know for certain that the fastest selling console of all time has achieved that title off of the backs of the Nintendo diehard fans, that means the demand was pulled forward into the year and the normies haven't caught on yet. So going into 2026, how is Nintendo's strategy going to change in order to solve this problem, right? Like, I mean, are they just going to sit around and hope the economy gets better and then release games that they feel are even better, like a 3D Mario or whatever, to try to drum up hype for the system again? That could be their strategy, right? Like, maybe they're hoping things blow over and global trade gets better and prices for components don't keep going up, even though there's no data to suggest that. In fact, it's probably going to get worse. Like, what is their strategy going to be into 2026 now that we know that the mass market doesn't seem to be hopping jumping on the hype train for the Switch 2 in the droves that people expected them to be. Are they going to lower the price even though the price of components is going up, right? I think they might be in for a price squeeze if we're being honest with ourselves. Like, they might not want to raise the price, but they might have to, or they might just leave the price the same and just start taking less profit from the Switch 2. And then I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe they'll increase the price of Nintendo Switch Online to compensate, because that's probably a super high profit margin product. And also it's the cheapest online service for many of the providers. If you compare it to like what Xbox offers and what PlayStation network costs and things like that, I think there's room there for them to sort of raise the price on that for customers. So we'll have to wait and see how Nintendo handles 2026. But one thing I think is for sure, banking on hype coming back for the Switch 2 is, I think, a risky play if you're not going to lower the price. If you're going to leave the price the same, then you're really going to have to rely on some banger games coming out in 2026. And will that happen? Maybe. Is the next Yoshi game going to do that? Is Mario Tennis going to do that? I don't think so. I don't think those are console sellers, to be honest with you. Now, as the library grows, people have more and more smaller reasons to get the console. That's part of it, right? But I think they're going to be in a worse position in 2026 than they thought, and definitely in a worse position than the diehard Nintendo fans thought after the obvious success of the Switch 2 launch failed to convert into mass market hype. Okay, with that being said, if you guys made it to the end of the video, consider dropping a thumbs up down below. It really helps out the channel a ton, and you guys might think you're subscribed because you've seen a ton of my videos, but you're actually not. Double check down below.